Are you planning on supporting the Prime Minister's deal next week?
Well, let's see what happens now. I think the good thing about what happened yesterday is, first of all, we've got that final insurance against no deal. And we've also now going to see this proposal go straight into bill committee stage, where we can test out and have our final chance to shape Brexit over the coming days. Because I think the other thing that was clear about yesterday is that this deal is now likely to pass. So the coming days, the coming couple of weeks really, are our final chance to shape Brexit, to lay down different amendments. There'll be some colleagues who want to lay down an amendment for a second referendum. Others will want to look at that future relationship and try and shape that. Others will want to lay amendments toughening up the workers' rights and environmental protections that my colleagues Caroline Flint and Melanie On got into this agreement. So let's see what comes out the other side now, and that's what we've got to do over the next few days.
So I noticed you slightly sidestepped the question about whether or not you're going to be voting for the deal when it comes back. Is that because you're still making your mind up?
Well, as I say, I mean, let's see how things shape out. I mean, I probably wouldn't have voted for it if we'd had a straight up and down vote on it over the weekend. But I do think now that we've got to move forward. We do have to resolve this issue. We have to resolve Brexit. Even if you're somebody who is advocating a second referendum, you still need to say what's going to be on the ballot paper. We still need to have a Brexit proposition. Time is running out, and that's why we've got to resolve Brexit. And I've always thought, I think it's been pretty clear actually, that the maths in Parliament have always been clear that people didn't want no deal, but the maths in Parliament have also been there for a deal, for the right kind of deal. I would have preferred a different sort of deal. I would have preferred a much softer Brexit, but I'm afraid those opportunities to shape that Brexit were thwarted in previous occasions. In the last few months, we had a set of indicative votes on lots of versions of Brexit. We had cross-party talks, and unfortunately those on the extremes of this debate on both sides have thwarted those efforts. So now we're kind of left with some various suboptimal options here, and we have to make a judgment about what the right thing to do is. So I think it's probably now boiling down to a Brexit of this deal versus a general election, and I would really worry about a general election when we haven't actually left the EU. I worry about what that would do to the Labour Party and the Labour communities that we represent, many of whom voted to leave and who are really angry that we've not actually respected the outcome of that referendum so far.
I mean, a couple of weeks ago, you signed this letter to the President of the European Commission along with 18 of your colleagues, and you said if a deal can be brought back to the Commons in the coming weeks that avoids a no deal and ensures greater certainty during the UK's departure, we believe it serves Britain's national interest to approve it. I just wonder why, if you believe what's in the letter, you would even consider not backing the deal, because it does take no deal off the table, doesn't it? And do you think that some of your Labour colleagues are at risk of leading us up the hill a bit, hinting that you want to back a Brexit deal, but then edging away at the last minute?
No, we want there to be a good deal for Britain, and that's what we were saying in that letter. And actually, I think that in part, in a very small part, maybe those kind of expressions and that letter helped to move on those conversations. But it wasn't a blank cheque for any deal. It wasn't a blank cheque for our votes on anything. And as I say, we now have, over the coming days, the last chance, I think, really, to shape Brexit. We've had lots of chances to shape Brexit in the past, and Parliament hasn't been able to come to a view about the sort of Brexit I was proposing at that stage, a common market solution where we stayed in the single market but we left the EU. That was rejected by Parliament, as were all the other options at the time. But now we do have a final chance, because I do think, following yesterday, and it's clear from your programme this morning, what Amber Rudd was saying and others, that the votes probably are there now for a deal. So we'll continue to work as Labour colleagues across the House and with the Labour front bench to try and shape that deal as best as we can before the 31st of October.
It's interesting you say that you think the votes are actually there for a deal. How many of your Labour colleagues do you think may end up supporting it?
Well, I don't know. That will be up to those Labour colleagues. But what I would say is that I found some of the attacks on Labour colleagues, some of the vilification of Labour colleagues, to be absolutely appalling. You know, we're talking about many Labour colleagues, Labour constituencies, actually not like mine. My seat voted Remain, but many Labour seats where the vast majority of their constituents voted to leave, and colleagues are trying to grapple with these very difficult issues. They're trying to respect the outcome of that referendum. They're trying to respect the views of their constituents, respect the views of their communities, and they're vilified for doing so. And I think that's something that's got really wrong in our politics. I mean, it shouldn't be an extreme position, should it, to say, look, we had a referendum, the result was something that I didn't campaign for, that many of us in the Labour Party didn't campaign for, but the result was what it was, which was a huge turnout, and people voted to leave the EU. And we have to try and respect that. And, you know, I'm talking to you here from Manchester, which is the home of the Labour movement in many ways, where the Peterloo massacre that we've just marked recently took place, where the Chartist movement, the trade union movement, the cooperative movement, in fact, the first meeting of the Labour Party was held. And what was that about? It was about giving voice, giving power, giving representation to working people in Parliament and in government. And it's many Labour communities that voted leave. And I really worry about us turning our back on those communities and saying to them, I'm sorry, your voice doesn't matter anymore. I'm not going to represent you. The Labour Party's not going to represent you any longer because we thought you were wrong, and actually we thought you were a bit ill-informed, and at times we thought you were a bit racist, and that's why we're going to ignore what you said. And I really worry about that, not just for the future of our democracy, but for the future of our party. And I think that's why we've got to work really hard now to try and respect the outcome of the referendum, but shape that Brexit deal, get the best possible outcome that we can over the coming days, and then let's get into that general election on a strong platform for the Labour Party.
Just to clarify, when you're talking about the abuse that some of your colleagues have faced, where is this abuse coming from? Is it coming from within the Labour Party?
Well, we've seen that, haven't we? We've seen members of the National Executive, we've seen other colleagues in Parliament saying that any Labour colleague who could possibly think about supporting a deal or wanting to leave the EU are not real socialists. They're not real members of the Labour Party. I mean, this is just, you know, it appalls me, frankly. And, you know, I think we just all need to take a step back here. We're all trying to make very difficult decisions in a complex scenario that's far from ideal. No one wants to be in this. I don't want us to leave the EU. It's not what I voted for. It's not what I want to see happen. In fact, I used to be the director of Britain in Europe for many years. So, you know, that's not where I come from. But we are trying to grapple with a set of suboptimal options, each of which are difficult. There is no easy solution here. Even a second referendum, which I don't think there still are the votes in Parliament. That's why it wasn't put to Parliament yesterday. Even on the day of the march, the vote wasn't put to Parliament because those advocating a second referendum know the numbers aren't there. So there's no easy path here out of the situation that we're in. And that's why it requires compromise. It requires us all coming together. And most of all, it requires us all to respect each other's opinions, respect each other's communities and each other's situation, and respect the fact that we're all coming at this with the right values and with the future of the country and the future of our party at the fore.